The Super Bowl is in the books and it's time for the off season. Where do the New York Giants now go from here? We're going to discuss that coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name's Patricia Traina. Happy to have you on this Monday. Happy Valentine's Day, by the way, to everybody. If you celebrate Valentine's Day here in the United States or all over the world, I hope it's a sweet one for you. And thank you so much for making the Locked On Giants podcast your first listen of the day, or if you're watching on YouTube, your first watch of today. And this episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is being brought to you in part by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. And on today's Locked On Giants podcast, it is the off season. That's right. The Super Bowl is now in the books. So that means everybody goes back to 0-0, and it's time to start thinking ahead to 2022. So what is the plan for the Giants? What might they be looking to do? What might they do? We're going to cover all those topics on today's show, and just see how it compares, how things unfold as the Giants go through the off season. If they make some of these suggestions or do some of these things, we'll see how it all comes together. But specifically, I want to talk about the program that new head coach Brian Daboll and his assistant staff is going to put together. I want to talk about potential roster moves, specifically in free agency, and just how I think they're going to try to build the culture up. And yeah, there's that word again, culture, right? We're all probably sick of it, but it is important. So that's what we're going to talk about on today's program. Let's get right into it, shall we? Okay, so where do things stand? Well, last week, the Giants announced all of Brian Daboll's coaching staff. So with all the pieces now, if you will, on board, I would think the next step is going to be for all those coaches to get together in a room and start evaluating players, because the player evaluation process, that's going to have to be something they need to do fairly quickly. The Giants are going to have to get under the cap, and I think there's probably about a month or so. I think the new league year is about a month or so away, and the Giants are going to have to make a number of decisions regarding who they're going to keep, who they're going to cut, who they might restructure, if they restructure anybody at all, which free agents do they want back, if any of them, and who they might want to target. So there is a lot of work to do in terms of a personnel perspective. So I'm going to start with free agency, because on Giants Country, we're actually doing a series, one per day, in which we're talking about free agents that may or may not be back for the New York Giants. So we'll start there. And I'm going to just kind of run down the list and give you a quick opinion as to whether or not that person may or may not be back. And oh, by the way, down the line, I might talk a little bit more in detail about that. But for now, I'm just going to give you an overview of that. All right. So the New York Giants have a total of 20 free agents to be. Of those 20, I believe they have 18 unrestricted free agents, and I think there's one restricted free agent, that being fullback Cullen Gillespie, and one exclusive rights free agent, that being offensive tackle Kyle Murphy. And I believe, I'll start with those two real quick. Kyle Murphy, I could see him, being brought back. Why not? He's going to get a reserve futures contract, so really doesn't cost a whole lot to bring him back. Cullen Gillespie, I'm not so sure I'd extend him. I mean, I certainly wouldn't put a tender on him because he was the second fullback, and it's going to cost the Giants roughly $2.433 million just to get right of first refusal to retain him. I don't see that happening, not with the Giants cap situation being what it is. So Cullen Gillespie was brought in to help with special teams. Carrying 2 fullbacks last year, quite honestly, was a luxury. I don't think the Giants do that again this year. So, all right, let's talk real quick about the unrestricted free agents. This is going to be fairly easy, folks. Nate Solder, not coming back. Austin Johnson, 50-50 on him. I think they may want him back. I wonder, though, if he doesn't get an offer somewhere, because he played fairly well last year in an increased role. Billy Price, I would bring back on a low tender. I wouldn't go crazy with spending on Billy Price, even though the offensive line is going to be targeted. But Billy Price, I would bring back for depth. Evan Ingram, that's a tough one. Evan Ingram, I would say move on from him, but the new coaching staff might feel that maybe they can salvage him. I don't know that that will be the case, but I would think Evan Ingram, they're going to move on from. Same with Jabril Peppers, the safety. I'm not so sure he comes back. Will Hernandez, Will has gone backwards. Now, I don't know if that's because of coaching. I don't know if that's because of the player or a combination of the two. But I could see the Giants moving on from him as well, just as much as I can see them maybe re-signing him to, like a one-year prove-it type of deal. See if maybe this new coaching staff can get him back on the right track, because he does have tools. It's just, the problem with Will has been in part the mental aspect of it, picking up stunts, passing off, blockers, all that stuff. That's where he's kind of lacked a little bit. And I wonder how much of that has just been because of the teaching that he's received in the classroom. But anyway, Levine Toilolo, tight end, Mike Glennon, quarterback, Nate Ebner, free safety, Danny Shelton, defensive tackle, Reggie Ragland, inside linebacker. Don't see any of those guys coming back. Nah. Eli Penny, fullback. I could see the Giants bringing him back. Casey Kreider, could see him coming back, although he's going on his 6th season, if I'm not mistaken. So, the Giants might want to go a little, cheaper there. I don't know, but I would have no problem with them bringing him back. Lorenzo Carter. Now, this is a tough one. Lorenzo Carter, I would say if they can get him back on a 2-year deal, which basically is going to be a 1-year prove-it type of structure, I would say do it. But I have a feeling Lorenzo Carter's going to get some attention. I wouldn't be shocked, actually, if Patrick Graham and the Raiders out there, make a push for him. Let's see. Corey Cunningham, I would bring him back on a 1-year, minimum salary benefit. Joshua Kalu, nah, pass. Dante Pettis, pass. Keon Crossan, I would bring back. He was probably one of their best special teams players. So I would bring him back, and I'd have no problem with that. And so that's the last of the UFAs. So I will go into this maybe a little bit more as we get closer to free agency, folks, once we kind of see who gets cut and who doesn't, because I think that's going to affect maybe some of these plans. But that's just a quick rundown on what I think they might do regarding their free agent class. Really nobody in there that screams you've got to re-sign, like last year how Leonard Williams, they had to re-sign him. So yeah, that's how I would handle it. So, all right, coming up next, we're going to talk about building a brand new culture yet again, what the coaching staff might look to do, how they're going to maybe approach it, and some of the principles that are going to be implemented under new head coach Brian Daboll. So stick around. We'll be right back. All right, Giant fans. Now, speaking of getting ready for the 2022 season, if you are like me and you are trying to get in better shape or stay in good shape, you will want to include Built Bar as part of your routine. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar, but without the calories and without the sugar. Most Built Bars have about 130 calories, about 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein, making it easy to stick to any diet plan and making it a great way to keep you full in between meals. Head on over to biltbar.com. Use our special promo code LOCK15 to save 15% off your first order. Again, that's code LOCKED15, LOCKED15, for 15% off your first order at biltbar.com. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I am Patricia Traina, and we're doing we're kicking off the off season. I mean, I know the Giants off season started a month ago, but the Super Bowl is in the books. No more football, no more meaningful football at any rate for the NFL until September 2022. We got a long way to go. Everybody is now back at 0-0, and the Giants have a lot of work to do to build up this program under new head coach Brian Daboll. So we're talking about that here on the program. And before I get into this next segment about how they're going to maybe attack building up this program, want to remind you, tomorrow will be Twitter Tuesday. So if you have a question, you can email it to me, lockedongiantspodcast@gmail.com. You can tweet it to me, and you can see my Twitter handle is on the screen below. And if you're listening, the Twitter handle is @Patricia_Traina. Make sure you tag it Ask P Train. That's important. That way it'll pop up on my screen. Also in the show notes, we have a brand new phone number that you can call with your specific questions. So if you want to have your voice featured on the Locked On Giants podcast on Twitter Tuesday, you can call up, leave a message, or if you want to text the message, the number you can reach us at is 732-924-8580. Again, that number is in the show notes, but again, the number is 732-924-8580. So hope to hear from you. I'm looking forward to answering your questions. We already have some questions that have come in that will make it on the show for Tuesday. So keep them coming, guys and gals. All right, let's talk about building the culture. Now, I know a lot of people are sick of the C word, culture. What does it mean? What's the big deal? Why is it so important? Culture is basically the foundation, basically the rules, how things are going to work around the locker room, around the program. All right. So is it going to be a country club? Is it going to be, a strict business type of atmosphere? Is it going to be something in between? What are going to be the principles that are going to be stressed? What's going to be tolerated and what's not going to be tolerated? All right. So what do we know so far about head coach Brian Daboll? Well, he told us at his introductory presser that he is a people person. All right. So he's approachable. His office door is always going to be open to his players. So if they have a problem, if they need to talk about something, he'll find the time to do that. He will also look to build relationships. So in other words, when he's walking through the locker room, he's not just going from point A to get to point B. He'll probably stop along the way and, kid around a little bit with his players, see how they're doing. He wants to get to know the players. And that's so important because when you get to know somebody, you get to understand what makes that person tick and how far you can ultimately push them, especially when you're talking about a competitive advantage. So that's going to be important. So what are some other principles that Brian Daboll may implement as part of the new Giants culture? Well, we're going to hear team first a lot. And that's something we heard with Joe Judge, but let's just talk a little bit more about that. Team first, obviously, this isn't about, Joe Smith, the wide receiver, padding his stats. If that's what you're looking to do, then you probably are not going to have a place on this Giants team. It's going to be about helping to pad the wins. That's what they mean by team first. So, and along those lines, they're going to want to play for each other. So, if you have two defensive linemen, for example, and one has to take on double blocks and can't rack up the sacks in his contract year, because he's doing all the dirty work to maybe help a Leonard Williams, that's what playing for each other is all about, doing your job so that the guys next to you, behind you, and if applicable, in front of you can succeed. Learning from mistakes. Now, this is a big one. Some coaches, when a player makes a mistake, they'll always say, we want to learn from our mistakes and grow from them. But there are times when a player makes a mistake and he's banished. he's sent to the inactive list. His snaps are cut down. So it's a tough balance to strike, because at some point you have to say, okay, is it a matter of the player just not learning? Is it a matter of the player just not having the skill set to do what we need him to do? What exactly is it? If the guy's just making a mistake and it's correctable, you work to correct him. And defensive line coach Andre Patterson had a wonderful, I saw a video clip of this, and he had a wonderful philosophy on how he teaches. And I'm going to paraphrase because I don't have it in front of me, but I saw it on Twitter, and it was really, really good. And I think it's applicable. Andre Patterson, who worked for I think about 10 years with the Minnesota Vikings before coming over to the Giants, said, I'm like a teacher, okay? If you're a math student and you don't know how to do a problem, how to solve a math problem, I'm not going to sit there and berate you or yell at you or call you stupid. I'm going to pull up a chair alongside of you, and we're going to work together so that you understand how to solve that problem. And I thought that was so good, because, sometimes coaches, they claim they're patient, they claim that they believe in teaching, and the actions show the other way. All right. So if a guy is constantly drawing penalties, for example, for being too grabby in the defensive secondary, instead of benching the guy, teach him how to do it the right way. And, look, there's pressure on coaches to do that, because look, you only have so many hours during the week with the players. You only have so many hours during the day to practice. And once the season starts, you can't really sit there and dilly-dally and do a lot in terms of, fundamentals. You touch on them, but you don't touch on them as much as maybe you do during the summertime. So I just like that approach, that comparison that Andre Patterson offered up. And I think that's going to be what we see a lot of with this coaching staff. There's going to be a degree of patience. And if the coaching staff is giving up on a guy, then that guy is just hopeless, that either he doesn't want to work at it or just doesn't want to get it. So that's going to be big. The other thing to go along with that, there have been some players that when they make mistakes, they tend to dwell on them, and it drags them down. Sometimes to the point where they don't perform as well, or sometimes to the point where they try too hard and it just becomes disastrous. There was a player like that on the Giants last year that I think was guilty of that. And the coaches are going to not want to stress that, obviously. If you make a mistake, if something doesn't work out, look, we all have our bad days. We all can't be perfect. So you learn from it and you move on. You don't sit there and dwell and say, oh my God, I suck at this. I'm never going to be any good at it. You move on. So there's a degree of psychology that's going to be applied here by this coaching staff to get this culture where it needs to be, to get the confidence in these guys. And one other point I want to make about this topic, and this is a big one. The coaching staff, I think, is going to go to the players and say, okay, tell me what you like to do. What have you liked to do over the course of your career, whether it be in college, whether it be in the NFL? And we're going to adapt to that. Now, I know last year or during the Joe Judge era, they talked about, don't tell me what a guy can't do, tell me what he can do. There were times I thought that the coaching staff last year asked guys to do things they couldn't do. And I think part of that was, it wasn't meant to be, ill-willed or anything like that. I think it was just, hey, Evan Ingram, you've been working so hard. You look like you're in good shape. So we think you can block a defensive end. Well, no, sorry. Evan Ingram could never really block a defensive end. Not that he didn't try, not that he wasn't willing, but he could never really do it. So maybe the coach is just saying, hey, we see you working hard. Let's try you let's try you out and have you block a defensive end. Sorry, guys, it was a disaster. So I think you're going to see less of that, and you're going to see the coaches start with, okay, Daniel Jones, what do you like to do best? Daniel will tell him, okay, Now, here's what we're thinking, Daniel. How do you feel if we ask you to do A, B, C, D? And then they have this dialogue going. So together, they're building not just the culture, but also confidence and competitiveness, and just they're pushing forward in terms of what they like to do, what they want to do, and just marrying the two up so that they can be successful. So I think that's going to be the recipe for the culture that Brian Dable's going to look to build inside the building. All right, Giant fans, football season might be over, but basketball is in full season for both pro and college hoops. And from all the latest odds, totals, player performance props, to where the next fired head coach is going to land, betonline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline.net is also the best spot for all your scores, your podcasts, all your sports news this season, whether it's basketball, hockey, boxing, UFC, and yes, even the Olympic coverage, which includes all kinds of information to help you gauge how to bet. So head on over to the website today and use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline.net, where the game starts. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I am Patricia Traina, and hey, we are now officially in the NFL offseason. And yes, the Giants have been in the offseason since their season ended, but everybody now is 0-0. We're starting from scratch. Everybody's focused on 2022, and the Giants, now that they have their new coaching staff in place, they are scrambling to get everything together, to get organized, decide what they want to do as far as a program, what players they might want, what are their needs, what's their offense going to look like, what's their defense going to look like, how's communication going to work. So many little details go into building up a program and how it's going to work. And things will change, obviously, as we go along. I mean, sometimes you mean to do something and then you find out it doesn't work. So you have to adjust. And this coaching staff, I think, will do that. I don't think they're going to settle on a specific way of doing things and stay married to it. They will adjust according to the roster they have. So that brings us to the type of football program that this staff might potentially run. And by football, I'm talking about the stuff on the field. In the last segment, I talked about the culture and building that up and what we might expect. So to put this segment together, I kind of went back and I looked at some of the things the previous coaching staffs that the Giants had did that I liked and what I didn't like. And this is what, I would think moving forward, Brian Dable's staff will want to do. Some of these things and what they want to avoid. So one of the things, obviously, that I think they're going to want to do once they're able to work with the players is optimize the time that they have with them. All right. Now, that means in training camp, no, soft practices, no abbreviated practices. Take advantage. If the CBA says you get 2 hours a day to practice on the field, you practice 2 hours a day. You don't say, everybody looks so good, so we're going to cut the practice short a little bit. No, you take advantage of that. You want to get this football team ready to play come September. You don't want to go soft on them. And I thought that at times, last year in particular, Joe Judge at times did not make good use of his practice time. I thought that of Ben McAdoo, too, that there were times when Ben McAdoo could have had a padded practice and he chose not to. Now, I get it. You don't want to necessarily run the players into the ground by having physical practice and long practice after long practice, especially in the heat. But you want to optimize the time you do have. So if it means spending more time on fundamentals and less time running around or whatever, you want to take advantage of whatever time you have and structure it accordingly. You don't want to give back time that, that's allotted to you. So that's item number one. Item number two, come the preseason, treat those games like regular season games. Now, by that, I don't mean game plan. You obviously don't want to give up what you're going to do during the season. But this selectiveness of, I'm not going to play my starters until the last preseason game because, they practice so well. No, no, no. Any NFL coach and even judge's staff and judge himself said that you cannot replicate game tempo in practice. So why you would not want to give your players as much exposure to that, even if it's just a series or a quarter or a half. I mean, that's just, you can't do that. You cannot do that. And you can't expect for your players to be ready if you're going to do that, and we saw that with the Giants last year. So here's hoping that they learn their lesson with that. All right, so what does it all mean for the Giants moving forward? Well, look, we can sit here and we can talk about how good we feel about things. We can talk about, all the intentions that maybe Coach Dable has. It's all, in the honeymoon stage right now. Everything is brand new. We're going to find out a lot about how this coaching staff is going to operate. We're going to find out a lot about how this new front office thinks in terms of some of the players that they keep and some of the players that they let go and some of the players that they bring in. So a lot of unanswered questions, a lot of gray areas still ahead of us. But look, folks, after almost a decade of poor football, can things get any worse? I mean, I know that's a loaded question, but I'm optimistic that this time the Giants are going to be headed in the right direction. And as I've said many times over, I will be optimistic until given a reason to think otherwise. So it's going to be a fun ride, everybody. And we will, of course, keep you updated on everything here on the Locked On Giants podcast, as well as over on Giants Country, which is the site that I write for. And we've got a bunch of stuff going on right now, including the series on the unrestricted free agents, whether they should stay or whether they should go. We're doing draft profiles, and we've got some other stuff. I'm working on some longer form articles for you, some of which we'll try and talk about here on the show. And speaking of the show, again, Twitter Tuesday tomorrow, and also coming up on the show this week, I'm going to hope to have Nick Filato on, and I'm looking to get another guest or two for the show. So, plenty more to do, plenty more to come. Hope you will tune in. Appreciate you tuning in to today's show. And I look forward to hearing from you for Twitter Tuesday. So until then, everybody, have a great one.